Today's webinar is on CAMWorks 2016 and what's new. So I'm Lindsay Woodmeyer. I'm an applications engineer for Hawk Ridge Systems, and I'll be showing you what's new in CAMWorks 2016. So I'm just going to start with just the supported platforms. The CAD applications that this can run in is SolidWorks 2015 and 2016, as well as CAMWorks Solids 2015-2016. And then the operating systems, we have Windows 7, Windows 8.1, and Windows 10. And then these are the 64-bit versions. So I just want to make sure that we're running on 64-bit. So I'm just going to open up the software here. So again, we're in the new 2016 version of SolidWorks. So the interface looks a little bit different. But CAMWorks, again, is essentially the same. So the add-ins come into CAMWorks 2016, and you're just going to add it in the same way. We've got the two previous tabs that we used to have in CAMWorks 2015 are still there. So we've got the workflow and CAMWorks 2016. And then in our design tree, we have the CAMWorks feature tree, our operations tree, which we've had in the past, but we now have this new CAMWorks tool tree. So this is a really neat new feature that they've added to 2016. So if I was to open up my machine settings, we've still got that tool crib tab in here. So this is basically what it's taken is this whole tab and added it as a tab inside of your software. So it's just a lot easier to add, edit, remove tools, save the tool crib, do all that kind of information inside this tab. So you'll actually see I've got tool crib 1 selected here, and that's what's showing up inside my my tool tree. So if I selected tool crib 2, press select here, and then OK, you'll actually see I've changed my tool crib now. So now I'm using tool crib 2 for this particular part. If I right click on that tool crib, I have the option of editing that tool crib, so you're just coming back into that window, just another way to get into that window. I can also add a new tool from the library. I can create a new tool, so if I open up that create a new tool, I can go ahead and choose whatever tool type I'm looking for, and then actually add in different dimensions for whatever I want to change that tool to. So I can basically make my own tools inside of here. And then I can also save the tool crib to the database from inside of this right-click menu. If I right-click on a tool, I have a couple different options. So I've still got my add a tool from the library and new tool, but I also have replace tool. So if I have a program that's already been created, and I'm actually going to show you if I open up one of these other parts here that already has tool paths on it, and come into my tool settings, you can actually see that some of them are black, and this actually means that there's a tool path associated to them. So this tool is being used in all of these different tool paths. So that's kind of nice because what I can do is say, okay, I don't want my facing to be done by this tool, I want it to be done by this tool, and I can just drag them down and drop them into that tool. So all I did was select the tool paths. I'm just going to select my face mills or face turning tool paths and drop them back into this tool 1 up here. I can also, by right-clicking on the tool, add in different operations based on whatever tool I'm using. So this one knows that it's a turning tool, so I'm only offered turning tool paths, but I could quickly just add in different tools in here. And then we've also got a couple new settings inside the tool. So if I wanted to go back in and say add tool from library, this window is new in 2016. So previous versions we would have a window that opened and all you could do is filter and then it would open up the actual library. Now they've actually made this new window that has both options in one. So I would choose what type of tool that I'm looking for, find the tool in the list that I'm looking for, and I can filter by looking by diameter or whatever I need to do there. And it gives you this nice little preview up in the right hand corner. So I can actually rotate that tool around just by holding down my middle mouse button and turning the tool. And you'll also notice that it still shows up in your graphics window as well, so you can kind of compare it to um, the size of holes and that kind of thing that you're looking for there. So that's still available. Another new option in 2016 is under our turning tools. We now have the option to filter. So in previous versions, you couldn't actually filter the turning tools, but now I can just filter by, the turn insert type. So we've got all the different inserts here, insert radius, tool material, all kinds of different options to filter those turn tools. So that's new. Another option that they've added is if I edit one of these tools, under my cutting parameters, if you're running your speeds and feeds by tool, we now have the spindle speed settings in surface meters per minute or feet per minute, whatever units you're working in. So that's brand new. Or you can turn that off and actually put the RPM in. But we now have the surface meters per minute and feet per minute settings. And they've also got under feed rates, feed per tooth settings. So that's brand new in 2016. The next option that I'm going to show you, and I'm just going to open up a different part here. This one. So if I come into this part here, it has no toolpath on it yet. I'm going to create a pocket. I'm just going to pocket out this feature here, so just in between the spokes there. So if I add in a new 2.5 axis feature, and I'm going to choose my pocket as my type. In previous versions, if you wanted to select this, it would be really difficult because all of these features are on different planes. But now in 2016, as long as I'm in open chain settings on my edge selection, I can click on all of the different lines here, and you'll actually notice that it's basically creating a tool selection on this plane. I think I've selected that guy there. Yeah, so you can actually see this little green selection here, and it's putting it on a plane, but you're not actually having to create a sketch to do that. So it's selected all the different entities and placed it on the top plane there. So if I come into my end condition, and maybe say up to stock for that, so then it's just going to go to the bottom of the stock there. But if I flip that, you'll notice there's still some stock at the top that's still there. So it's not quite at the plane that I want it to be. But we now actually have in 2016 this second direction end condition. So I can say up to stock here, and now I've got the whole thing selected. So we now have a second direction that's available. So I can generate the toolpaths for those. And now that's going to machine out that whole. So that's nice. A nice new feature in 2016 that they've added for the 2.5 axis. And another one that I will show you is on this part. It's just kind of easier to see. So if I wanted to just machine this section at the top here, and I wanted to use maybe a really small tool to get this little part here, in previous versions I wouldn't be able to select this whole thing because it actually stops here. And it has a little gap in there. I would actually have to create a sketch to select that area. So now in 2016, you can go ahead and select all of these features. And again, I'm setting on open chain. So I'm just going to select the features or the edges. And if I scroll down to the bottom of my selected entities, you'll notice we now have this little join area. So it's just this little pink line that gets added into your selection, and it'll actually select that whole process for you and give you a joined section. So you don't have to create a sketch to select that area. You can only have one join section right now. I assume they'll probably be adding a second join section or multiple join sections in future versions, but right now we just have the one join section that you can use in these. So my end condition, I'll just come down and select the bottom. And then I can generate the operation plan and the tool paths. So there's my rough mill and my contour just for that section there. And I didn't have to create a sketch to do that. So I'll open up another part to show you this other new feature. So um, I'm just going to run our automatic feature recognition and try and find all the different machinable features on this part. So what it's found is in this section in the center is what I'm kind of concerned about, is my irregular pocket here is going to machine all of this whole feature up to this plane. And then it's going to create a rectangular pocket for this bottom surface here. So sometimes maybe that's how you want to machine it, but if I wanted to maybe select this whole feature on the left-hand side first, machine that out, and then come and do this whole section on the right-hand side, we can actually do that now. So if I come into my CAMWorks options, under my Mill Features tab, and I go down to Recognize Features by Depth. I can click on that little box there and then regenerate my features. And now I've got a rectangular pocket on the right-hand side and an irregular slot on the left-hand side. So that's a nice option for selecting different features. So again, it's Recognize Features by Depth. And you can go back and forth just by checking and unchecking that box, however you want to machine it. This is available only in the manufacturing view method, so if you change to AFR, it isn't there. So it has to be manufacturing view and recognize features by depth. You'll also notice on this page, or on this part here, we've got some dotted lines here. So those are actually showing an error feature. So if I come actually into my irregular slot 5, you can kind of see it better. These two edges here are treated as error features. So the tool will actually come off the edge here because it knows that there's no wall that it's going to hit there. So it's actually going to show you now when you highlight the feature whether there's an error feature associated to it. And another thing that I can show on this part, if I add in a new 2.5 axis feature, and it can be any feature here, this is just for selection process. As long as I'm on open chain here, previously I was just kind of going around and selecting all of these little edges and going all the way around. But now if you hold shift or control down and just select that last edge, it'll actually loop it around for you and select that. So I'm just going to do that again. If I create a new feature, and I can even do a slot or something like that, any feature that you're looking for, just as long as it's on open chain. I'm going to select that first edge, and then hold shift or control, and select the last one. And it's going to select that whole inside feature there. So that's a really nice selection feature that they've added to 2016. If I come into my operations tree and right click on the setup and I want to add in an operation without adding it to a feature first, I can say I want to add in a new 2.5 axis. Let's put a contour in for example. This new window is much more simplified than in previous versions. So in previous versions, you would have a little arrow up at the top here saying, okay, next page, you keep going into different windows. But they've actually simplified this into one nice window. So at the top, you choose your tool path that you're looking for. So we chose the contour. It's going to give me a preview of what that's going to look like. You can choose a feature that's already been created. Or you can create your own feature from here. So I'm just going to put it on that pocket, press OK. You've got your parameter default settings, your tool settings are in here, and then your options are at the bottom. So this is all basically condensed down into one simplified window. And there's my contour. Another setting that I'll actually show you while we're in this contour. So I'm going to edit the definition on this contour mill. And I'm going to add in a chamfer toolpath. So I just want a different tool that I can use to chamfer this part. So I'll just use a countersink for now. If I come into my contour settings and turn on my chamfer machining, If I was to go through and add in a length of say 3 inches here, in previous versions it would let you, but now if I try to add in that length, it actually gives me this warning message and says the resultant chamfer length will be 0 for the current combination of tool diameter, chamfer length, and clearance. Please modify the tool diameter, chamfer length, or clearance. So it's basically telling you that you can't put that amount on that chamfer. So then it gives you a suggestion or like a limit. So let's just say I put in, a 1/4 inch, and that's actually fairly large. So and then if I want, I can do the same on the clearance. So let's say I put in 3 inches on the clearance as well. It's going to give me that same message. And then you'll actually notice that it gives me a clearance that matches that length. So what it's actually doing is eliminating the manual calculations that you had to do to enter your chamfer machinings sizes into. So it'll actually give you suggestions within that window. And then I can preview that, and there's my new chamfer. And while I'm in this part, I'm just going to generate the operation plan and my toolpaths for this one. And I'm just going to go into my rough mill settings. And under my pattern in my roughing tab, I'm going to change this to volume mill. So this is a new feature in our volume mill toolpath. If we come into our settings button right beside the volume mill there, we now have a new entry method. So it's called pre-drilled holes. So if I choose OK there and just preview that, you'll actually notice that it's actually added in an entry drill here. So I'm just going to press OK. So you've got the entry drill and then our volume mill tool path. So if I simulate that, we can just step through and see the drilling process. There's my drill, and then it comes in with the correct tool there for my volume mill and runs my volume mill tool path, and it's all based on that entry drill point. So it basically takes the entry point out of the equation. So most people actually use an entry drill to start their volume mill, and now it's actually going to put that in for you. So that's a really nice feature. So that's volume mill. And then if I actually go into this drilling tool path, choose edit definition, and go into my drill hole parameters, we've actually now got gun drilling that's available inside of your milling tool paths, your drill options. So we can use gun drilling. This for sure has to be available in your post processor. So I would double check that you can actually run gun drilling in your post processor beforehand, before trying to run this. But this is now available if you can use it on your machine. And then speaking of drilling, I'm just going to go into a different tool path or a different part here. In our multi-axis tool paths, we've actually now added drilling. So we've got a center drill here set for these holes. And then we've also got multi-axis drill tool path. So if I edit the definition on that and come into my pattern settings, you'll notice now instead of the milling, which this is the same window we had in previous versions, we now have this drop down at the top where we can choose drilling. So drilling, we would just have to specify lines to drill off of. So if I choose the lines here, you actually see that I have to select a sketch to use as my drill sketch. So if I press cancel here, I'll just show you the sketch that I used. So we'll view that sketch. So I've actually got a 3D sketch that I created. Just put lines in the middle of all of these holes so that my drill will go straight down the center of those holes and drill them out. So if I come back to my tool path, you'll see that our settings, when we select the line, so I'm just going to select that drill sketch that I created, you'll see that they actually put little tiny arrows on the bottoms of all of these lines. So I can reverse the direction. Maybe I want to come up from the bottom and drill those out. So that's definitely an option. So it doesn't need to be, it'll set them in one direct way, but you can flip that direction. And then in the pattern settings, we've got lines or lines and depths. So lines, you can just add the tip length. So it's just going to go the depth of that line and then add the tip length at the end. Or we can turn that off and you can actually see the picture is going to show you what the tip basically does. And then lines in depth is actually, it'll drill through to the bottom of that line, and then you can actually add a further depth. So if you want it to go a little bit further into that part, then you can add a depth in there as well. Okay, so that's new for multi-axis. Another new option in multi-axis is under our gouge checking. We have apply gouge checking to our tilt tool is the strategy. And then we've got use lead lag or side tilt angles, those two sections. So in previous versions, you could only use the min or the max values. And now you can use both. So I can set both so to different values if I want to change that up. So that's for both lead lag and side tilt under our tilt tool strategy. All right, and I'm just going to close out of that part. If I come back into this part here and go into my drilling, I'm going to go into the hole settings and change the actual parameters to bore. And then I'll generate the operation plan. So what I'm showing you is inside of the bore settings. So if the type is boring, we can actually add a dwell and a shift amount now on our boring toolpaths. The dwell would be for boring or boring with dwell, or back boring and fine boring have been added for the shift amount. So a value basically has to be specified for the tool to move towards the center line of the feature. So this value can now be defined as that shift amount. And then boring and boring with dwell all have dwell settings in there as well. So and again, this has to be handled by your post processor. So we have to just make sure that the post can handle that, and then you can go ahead and use the boring settings. Another feature that I will show you is just in our mill turn options. So in our toolpaths within mill turn, if I just edit one of these toolpaths, under my NC tab, we now have an advanced approach and retract settings. So if I turn that on and press the define button, I'll just open up the little preview window here, you can actually see the different approach and retract settings that are inside of here. So if I change them around, you can actually see it move in the preview and show you what you're actually setting. So Z and then X. I can turn that autocorrect on and it'll actually use a clearance. I can change it to none or X and then Z. Same with the other one. So tons of different options in here. And then you've also got the retract position. So you can set it to the XE absolute preset, which is the point that the actual toolpath will start at, or your program will start at. Or you can change it to a safe index and actually set up a new position. So a couple different options inside that window. And again, that's for your mill turn toolpaths under the NC tab. And you just have to turn on that use advanced approach and retract. And speaking of turning, if we go into one of our turning toolpaths, so we'll just edit the definition on that turn tool, you'll actually see we now have a B-axis incremental angle under the holder settings. So again, as long as your machine can handle the B-axis, we can actually tilt that tool. And then you'll actually see the tool being tilted right on the screen too, so you can kind of see whether that's going to match up and cut that the way you want it to be cut. So B-axis can be set up now in our turning tools And that doesn't have to be a mill turn, that can be in standard turning as well. Another option for turning that I'm going to show you is actually in the technology database. So we're now in the 2016 database under turning and features and operations, features and operations again. You'll notice we now have a stock material group under our turning features and operations, which wasn't there in previous versions. So in any of these feature types, they all now have a stock material group setting. Another thing while we're in the tech database, if I come into my user-defined strategies, and this could be for any machine, so it doesn't just have to be for turning, we now have the option to copy a strategy or to delete the strategy. So depending on what strategy you're in, so maybe the face feature, maybe I want to take that course strategy and copy it, so I can press this copy button. It creates a course copy strategy. And if I close out of this and come into my features and operations, and go into my face feature. So we had course. There were 4 different strategies associated to that, so different sizes, and solid and chord options. Now I actually have a course copy, and what I can do is I can go in and make changes to those to make it slightly different than whatever I copied. So if you're just making 1 or 2 changes, it's really easy to now create that toolpath or that strategy. And then we can come back into the user-defined and find that face feature, course copy. I can select that and then I can actually delete it as well. And this is a nice little warning box because it actually says that it's going to be deleting all of these different features. So there's quite a few different strategies that are associated with it. So you are deleting all of the course copy strategies. So it's going to give you a nice little warning beforehand. So that's the tech database. And the next thing I'm going to show you is actually in setup sheets. So if I right click on the NC manager and go to my setup sheets and generate, we have 2 new options in the bottom of the setup sheets now. So we can generate part assembly images based on an orientation. So right now it's just going to create isometric views, but you can turn on however many you want. And make as many images as you want. And these are actually going to go to, I'm going to show you, in CAMWorks options under our file locations tab. We've actually got a location right here where all of these images are going to go to. So you can create your own setup sheets and use these images, or you can use the templates that are already provided. So setup sheet, generate. So we've got generate part assembly images, and we've also got generate tool images. So it'll actually create little pictures of all the tools as well. And we've got a few different templates that work with these in here. So mill turn tooling would actually create, use these tool images and create a template that uses all of the tool images there. So based on the template that you used, I'll use whichever images that you're saving out. And the next thing that I'm going to show you is under our rebuild options. So if I right click on the NC manager, and sorry, I have to be under the feature tree. So right click on the NC manager, we have rebuild here. In previous versions, we just had rebuild. We now have a light rebuild available. And you can also go to tools, CAMWorks, rebuild, or light rebuild. So what light rebuild does is basically rebuilds any changes that have been made to your IFR features, so your interactively inserted features. So if you added features in manually, those ones would be rebuilt if you just choose light rebuild. And then if you want to use, want to regenerate or rebuild the features that were created by your extract machinable features, then you would use the full rebuild. Another new feature that's been added to 2016 is something called the default feature strategies. So you can select that from your command manager here, or again, the tools, CAMWorks, and default feature strategies. We'll just open that window up. So this is a really nice feature because you don't actually have to go into the tech database to find your default feature strategies. This is just a really quick window to use that feature in. So both mill and turn are in here, so you've got both of your feature settings in here. And then we've got all of the different features that are available and the actual strategy that it's set to. So you would just kind of turn that on and change the strategy to whatever you want to change it to, and it would actually change that default strategy. And you can apply that to the part that you're working on, or you can save that to the technology database. So the settings, you can save it back to the database, and it'll actually save all the defaults that you've changed. It'll save them all back as your main default. So the next part you open, it'll use those on. So that's a really nice new window that they've added, just so that you don't have to kind of go into the technology database and try and find all your defaults and that kind of thing. Okay. And then if I come back to just a milling part, if I go into my part setup inside of my operations tree and choose edit definition, under my origin settings, we now have a new default origin that it defaults to. So it's the top center of the part. It used to default to this user position, which could be basically anywhere. So it's now this top center of the part model, where it'll actually default your origin to. We have the top center, mid center, bottom center of the part model in here that's always been in here. Now in the stock vertex, they've also added top, mid, and bottom for the actual stock material. So if your stock's a little bit larger or kind of a wonky shape, it'll actually choose the center of the stock instead of the center of the part. So you can actually choose that in here. And they also added a nice new image of the actual stock, so you can actually see kind of that little hidden stock or ghosted stock there. So if you were to go ahead and choose maybe a vertex that was out in space, it's actually now on the stock corner. In previous versions, you wouldn't be able to actually see that stock, so they've added that in there. That's nice. And the last thing that I want to show you is actually in our wire EDM machine. So if I change the machine here to wire, and I'm going to just right click on that machine and choose edit settings. Under my EDM setup page, in previous versions, we just had this list of wire diameters, so just standard wire diameters were in here. You can now use this edit wire sizes, and it'll actually let you add in whatever size you're looking for. So you can type in either an inch or metric. It'll actually add in both versions. So you can delete ones that are in the list, you can add to that list, you can insert in different areas of that list. That's a nice new addition to the EDM settings, so we can definitely specify what kind of wire diameter we're looking for. And that's pretty much it. So if you are looking at attending any more Webinar Wednesdays in December, here's a list of them. They are also on our website, so definitely check those out. And thank you for attending. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to contact us. Thanks.